So much for speaking to the BBC Hindi from all the way from Norway. First of all, tell us something about yourself. What do you do for a living? You are a journalist. Where have you been working? Tell us a brief introduction of yourself.
First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I just briefly, I worked as a journalist for 5 years, over 5 years now, and I've worked with national newspapers in Norway.
So, Ella, you were at an event where the Indian Prime Minister was accompanied by the Norwegian Prime Minister, and they had a joint statement. So, could you tell us about the sequence of events, as in what happened? Because we'll come to the part wherein you asked something from the Prime Minister who was moving away from that dais. But first of all, what was the sequence of events yesterday?
They come into the room and they start speaking. First, Prime Minister of Norway speaks about India and Norway and the agenda for today, strengthening ties between our two countries. And then also your Prime Minister, Modi, has his shares his beliefs and also what his aim is for this state visit. And usually during these types of press conferences in Norway, they will do the exact same thing, talk together to the press that has come today or yesterday, and then they will also take a few questions. For example, when Macron was here last year, Macron was also taking questions from Norwegian reporters. Not many, but he did take some. When we get powerful nations to our small country that is also looking to strengthen ties with us, it is our job to try to ask questions. I know that your Prime Minister does not like to take questions, but it was my duty to ask.
The Indian Prime Minister has, whenever he goes outside on sort of official visits, there have only been two instances which have been abroad when he has also taken questions, but it doesn't happen quite often. So before that, I want to ask whether it was announced beforehand that both the prime ministers will be taking questions, or
No, we knew from advance that there would not be any questions.
Okay.
So that makes my job as a journalist even more important, because we cannot have foreign leaders in that just set the premise for democracy. What is a democracy? And you, your prime minister, want to be the largest democracy in the world. What is the democracy without the possibility of questioning the most powerful person in your country?
All right. So, okay, we'll come back to this again.
Of course.
The journalists present there were not informed that there will be an interaction between the prime ministers and the journalists, right?
Because it wasn't planned. It wasn't planned. There's
Okay.
And that is something, the premise of that I question. And that is my job as a reporter, to also question the frame of these state visits. And given the situation for press freedom in India and also human rights violations, of course, it's my duty to try to ask a question to the most powerful man of this very large nation.
Yes, of course. So we're talking about the Press Freedom Index, and of course, Norway tops that index, and India in the last few years has come down to 157 in the most recent rankings. So tell me, I'll again come back to that Press Freedom Index. How important is a Press Freedom Index for a journalist who's working in Norway to ask this question to a visiting head of the state?
We take great pride in Norway of how our society works. We take pride in the fact that our prime minister, when he is visiting just even the tiniest places in Norway, there could be villages with just a few thousand people, he will take the time to talk to the local news stations or newspapers.
It has been reported that the Norwegian Prime Minister, Mr. Støre, returned back after this to take questions from media persons. Were you present there?
So last week you had to sign up for all the press events that day, and I thought I'd sign up for India's the first press conference, which I call it, with Modi and Støre. And then I thought I would sign up for the one that's today with the Nordic leaders. So I was not present for the one where my prime minister did take questions from the Indian press. So my prime minister, who was to his defense in a hurry yesterday, after Prime Minister Modi left, my prime minister took questions from the top channels and newspapers in Norway. I was not in that line either. I asked if he had time, and he didn't have time. And to me, that's okay, because I know that at some point I can get time with him this week if I want to, and I'll try today as well, of course. But for the Indian reporters, I think he should have taken questions from the start. But I'm very pleased to see that he did so later that same day. That was important.
India has always said that it respects values of human rights. There are no human rights violations which take place in the country. There is rule of law. There is respect for institutions, mostly democratic institutions, be it the judiciary, be it the legislature or the executive. And the government always says that we conduct free and fair elections. So, how do you, or how do journalists who work in sort of countries where press freedom is paramount look at the whole argument of what the government claims and how things are?
That's a great question. I think it's always going to be difficult when you're not on the ground yourselves, but I rely on international reports from Amnesty, from the Human Rights Watch. And I also, after yesterday, have received a lot of messages from many Indians around your country. That is, some of the things they're describing is truly very alarming. And but mostly, as I know that there's a big disagreement between people that are pro the current government and those that are against. So mostly I rely on the sources that I still trust to this day. And I know Amnesty is controversial for some. It's not controversial for me.
After that, the Indian Foreign Office apparently tagged you on X, asking you to come to a briefing, a proper briefing, wherein you asked the question again. And so how was that experience? And were you really satisfied with the reply that you got?
No, I can first start off with I was already invited from the first press conference to this event later tonight, so I had already planned to go. But of course, it's nice that the embassy of Indian Embassy of Norway invited me. But I went there and I went with my questions. But a little bit of the problem with that setting, in my opinion, which I also tried to ask, could you also answer now, right now, so that we can go back and forth? The problem is that they took questions, they took maybe noted 3 to 4 questions, and then they start responding. And that's difficult because as a journalist, I also have to try to push back if you're not answering my question. And he did not answer my question yesterday. I was asking him about if we can trust India given the human rights violations, and he did not want to tap into the human rights violations. So I tried to interrupt him after a minute or so, trying to direct him to the topic that I'm interested in, but I was unsuccessful of that. It went into how India was supplying vaccines in 2020 and also talking about yoga at one point. And I love yoga. So, and I like a lot of the Indian culture. So I think India does so much well as well. But I don't come to these press conferences to talk about what any country do super well, usually. Then it's got to be something very different and new. And India's initiatives on the green agenda is very well known. And it's interesting that we are going to be cooperating more closely, and we all have a climate change to solve, a climate crisis to solve as well. So I will definitely include that in some of my reports or my commentary that I'll be writing at the end of the week. But for my questions, I choose to focus on things that really matter.
Only recently, in the last week itself, the Dutch Prime Minister had also expressed concerns about freedom of minorities in India and the rule of law in India?
I wasn't super surprised, but I think you should always go in and try your hardest, you know. And some might have thought I came across a little bit rude, especially at the second press conference. And I just want to say that that's kind of how confrontational journalism works, that you have to try to interrupt, have to try to get more answers, and the answers that you're looking for. But I know I didn't get that yesterday.
The supporters of the Prime Minister and the government in India are saying that it was not interaction. It was not an interaction with the press which was announced beforehand, as you also said. I mean, that perhaps is, they say, was the reason why the Prime Minister did not respond. How do you look at these counter arguments?
Well, does he ever respond to questions directly from the press? I have not seen that, unless it looks a little scripted. And I think
Yeah, he's been twice abroad. Once when he was addressing a press conference with the U.S. President Biden, and
yeah, that's
one more time.
abroad.
Yeah,
That's not even his own journalists, which is, well, you guys are probably with the press crew, but he should answer questions to his press, and he should allow for a critical press. And
right.
when you're a journalist in India, there are other risks. You know more better than I do.